What's good with YouTube? You already know Big Flacco with a convict's perspective. Now I'm smashing, dashing, sliding on through with a little bit of energy. Please hit the like, subscribe, comment, do all those things to help support this channel, and hit that bell notification for future fire content. And we got a story, man. This is really an interesting one. This just goes to show you how dirty politics can get behind the scenes, where issues were raised, where almost an attempt on a northerner's life was made out of fucking personal vengeance and personal revenge, man. And we're gonna be talking about Albert Doughboy Martinez. Okay, now Doughboy, at a time when James Cornell Perez was demoted, a handful of carnales, right, who were claiming that they were C's, were recruited allegedly by Cornell. Now their C status came into question, and I remember it at that time that Corning and others sent out filters with certain names where their C status weren't being valid or acknowledged by the feds because of Cornell. So apparently, anybody that was recruited under Cornell at that time were told that they were invalid. Further directives were told to each one that they were told not to say that they were NF members, that their status wasn't legit. Now, when individuals were told to cease saying that they were carnales, there was one individual that stood out the most, and that was Doughboy. Every Familiano had lost much confidence in this particular individual, as those in the Bay were receiving many reports from the streets that Doughboy was on the streets using drugs and basically running amok, basically acting a fool. Eventually, Doughboy would end up in Pelican Bay, C3, and was being told that he is not to claim that he was a carnal. Now, apparently, Doughboy was trying to attempt to debate what the carnales were telling him and claimed that Conejo had recruited him and that his C status was valid. Cornell was in fact asked about Doughboy prior to getting at Doughboy, and at that time Cornell stated that he never recruited Doughboy and was attempting to wash his hands from having anything to do with Doughboy due to all the negative feedback that C's were receiving about Doughboy. In fact, every C was acknowledging that Doughboy basically had no qualities about him that was a C, and some were calling him the idiot. The only one I ever heard personally from my ever speak positive about Boy was Lencho, believe it or not. That's not too good company right there. So around this time, the C started hearing that Doughboy was walking around with an NF tattoo. So the C's in C2 and C4, the Familianos, were hearing about this and they were addressing him, and that they were hearing that Doughboy was unwilling to adhere to what the NF was stipulating to him on paper. So at that time, the Carnales decided to send another Carnal over there, which ended up being Familiano, Philip Montoya, aka Gangster, who at that time was in C3. And he was sent there to go deal with Doughboy by telling him to remove the NF tattoo and to shut his fucking mouth when it comes to the NF. Gangster was successfully moved from C4 to C3 and was able to relay the message clearly. Upon Doughboy's release from Pelican Bay, Familianos received reports that Doughboy had in fact covered up the NF tattoo. There was no further incidents from Doughboy at that time. Now, furthermore, Doughboy was in Pelican Bay. He was claiming that a man by the name of Toker de Jolis, who was also in Watsonville on the streets, had recorded his sister performing sexual acts and showing everybody said video, therefore requesting a green light to kill Toker. Doughboy was claiming that he would carry out the hit personally if the green light was given. Eventually, the Carnal DC, David Cervantes from Chino, gave the green light. Therefore, Toker was marked as a target, and Doughboy was to carry it out once on the streets. Doughboy eventually probed with the green light. He desperately wanted and would come face to face with Toker on at least 2 separate occasions, and each time Doughboy never attempted to execute the green light. Instead, he partied with Toker like it was all good. Now, around 2008, you had the Familianos, Javier Pelon Martinez from Watsonville, right? Martin Cyclone Montoya, and who's also C. And then you had Gangster Montoya from Salinas, right? Gangster and Cyclone are actually cousins. And a few Enso dolls went to this meeting to hear all the complaints about Doughboy. The video that Doughboy was claiming that Toker had of his sister doing sexual acts was presented and seen by all 3 carnales in Norteño Soldados. And they've seen how Doughboy had misrepresented his claims while in Pelican Bay in order to establish a green light on Toker. Through all the ends that were present, given their complaints about Doughboy, it had become extremely clear that Doughboy had lied, trying to get Toker crossed up, And eventually it was learned that him and Toker had some personal issues. This is when they heard all kinds of, acts of Doughboy running amok, using dope and making poor decisions, and basically pushing up on a lot of people out there. A lot of people didn't know that he had some baggage, that he had some things to answer to within the NF. Now, all three C's elected to clear Toker and place Doughboy on freeze with the intent to get the information to the Bay and await the Bay's response. Doughboy was in the county jail at that time. So basically, they were respecting DC made a decision, but DC made that decision based upon false information that Doughboy was providing them. Now, around this time, they made numerous attempts to get at DC and get at Brass and let them know what time it was with Doughboy. But IGI kept on intercepting these letters. You know what I mean? The letters never got there. They were confiscated. Eventually, Belone would eventually get caught up. They felt this was the time that Doughboy would have to answer for these allegations, right? Now, eventually, Doughboy gets his C status cleared up somehow, I think before he even stepped home, right? But in 2009, Doughboy was in San Quentin and holding the keys to the yard. And while there, Gangster De Salas got there on a 6-month violation. Once again, ends began complaining that Doughboy was being aggressive and acting invincible. Ends that were spoken revealed that once Gangster got to the yard, he was able to witness Doughboy's unruly interactions with Ends, and Gangster immediately went to work, taking over. He basically stripped Doughboy of his position and took over San Quentin at that time. Now, Doughboy, as a C, tried to claim that he couldn't do Machina and he wasn't doing Machine, but he was forced to partake in Machine because everybody knew that he wasn't doing it because Doughboy was basically a short little fat boy. Let's just keep it real. Eventually, Doughboy gets where he gets and started to fucking file complaints on other C's, including Gangster, trying to get them crossed up. Now, bear in mind, Gangster was being more than fair, and he was known to be a fair carnal. Therefore, Doughboy feared that information would get to where it needed to get first, right, and cross him up. So, Doughboy was trying to fucking cross up Gangster and others before this could even happen. Because he already knew that Gangster had all this information that the video that he claimed to DC, which showed his sister doing certain sexual acts, was not true. It was actually a video of her bending over, and you could see maybe part of her cleavage. That's it, because she was picking up a baby, but you couldn't even see any frontal nudes at all. So it was all false information. And that basically Doughboy was trying to have an end killed out there on the streets with bogus information. Now, it's a little bit of additional information that I want to provide. Now, I had communication briefly with Doughboy when I went through Corcoran in around 2006, I believe it was, right? And that's when I was passing through. I was in the walker balloon cages, and they didn't have group yard anyways, but I see Mondo Quinn. He walks by, and he tells me, "Hey, we got something for you." Okay. Then about an hour later, Silver comes by, and Silver gets at me and says, "Hey, we got something for you. Can you see me?" Because Silver remembers that I couldn't see that good without my glasses. Now, bear in mind, I had a close relationship with some of the C's that were there. I had known Silver. I was in the same pod with him. Mondo, Sombras from way back when Carlitos was in charge. So I was pretty familiar with a lot of brothers that were there. And so when I go back to the pod, I'm going to leave pretty soon, within any day. And finally, it was Doughboy that reached out to me and basically asked me to send his to Lencho, and that when I got out there, it was placed upon me to find out who was actually the one that was supposed to be in charge in Corcoran, because at that time you had two people that were bumping heads, Sombras and Silver. I remember also forwarding 2 names and requesting that these be sent to the regiment commander, that these are individuals that I pulled that I just need the stamp. And he thought I was asking him at first, and I said, nah, just go straight to your RC and just film in this and that, which he did. And that was my interactions with him, right? I was just following instructions, being asked, when was he coming home and whatnot. So that was my only encounter with him. Now, eventually, Doughboy ends up getting himself caught up. He catches a case with Lucifer, right, from City Hall. And in that paperwork, right, he pretty much actually, it seemed like he was, I don't think he was coerced. I think he just gave up the statements off top, right? Didn't exercise his right to remain silent, and pretty much implicated a lot of individuals that were involved in that situation. In fact, he referred to Lucifer as a killer and was saying that basically he was forced by Lucifer to go ahead and deal with this individual, right? Now, situations like that happen in this, where a northerner was given a green light on, happened all too often back in those days because there was those that they ascend to a position of status, they start to utilize that status. They hide behind that status. Therefore, if they have any type of personal gripe with you, it's easy for them to get ahead of the story and cross you up. And that's what pretty much happened in this whole fucking matter because some of those carnales got fucking crossed up as well. Now, bear in mind, Doughboy had requested for him to be the one to deal with it, right? But every time he had the opportunity, he would pass it on. And he was trying to get his own homeboys from his hood, basically, or those in Watsonville that were working with him to deal with it. Because, see, at first he wasn't, in position to where his status had been fucking cleared. Eventually, when he was there in the Bay, his status got fixed. And that's why pretty much a decision was made upon the individual toker without looking into, because DC pretty much just backed up what the Carnal had said. Anyway, eventually Doughboy ended up dropping out. This kind of thing used to happen all the time back in the days, man. And it's unfortunate that people from time to time forget where they come from, forget what it's all about. And at times try to seize that power any which way they can out of personal anger, personal past, hostilities, whatever it may be, man. But that's not the nature of the game. With that said, it's your boy Flacco. Hope you guys enjoyed this spill. This kind of stuff happens, like I said, every day, man. Favoritism, individualism, set tripping. And then you get the wrong person who ends up having that jurisdiction and power. Hey, it's a huge responsibility. And if you don't follow in accordance to your laws or was expected, you can surely fall off.